For over 6 decades, India embarked on one of the most ambitious economic experiments the world has ever seen. We're talking about the 5-year plans, these massive, detailed blueprints designed to build a modern nation, pretty much from the ground up. So let's unpack this incredible 65-year journey and see how it shaped the country we know today.
I mean, just think about it for a second. Imagine you've just won your independence. Now what? How do you build a modern economy, take care of millions of people, and carve out your place on the world stage? That was the giant question facing India. And its answer? A series of centrally managed 5-year plans. Let's dive into how this whole thing got started. Now, you might think this all kicked off right after independence, but the idea of a planned economy wasn't pulled out of thin air. Actually, it had been a hot topic for decades, creating this really rich foundation of ideas long before the first official plan was ever put into action.
The groundwork was being laid as far back as 1934, with M. Viswesvaraya's book, and that's exactly why he's often called the father of Indian planning. But look at all the different voices here. You've got politicians chiming in, some of the country's top industrialists coming together for the Bombay Plan, and even socialist thinkers. All these different visions, all these competing ideas, they all swirled together to create the blueprint for India's economic future.
So that brings us to the foundation era. These first few plans were all about laying the groundwork. Focusing on the absolute essentials, like agriculture and heavy industry, all while facing some of the very first major tests for the new nation.
The very first plan was laser-focused on one thing: food. The big idea, based on something called the Haridomar model, was that growth comes from savings and investment. So the government poured money into agriculture. We're talking massive projects like the Bakra Nangal and Hirakud dams. But it wasn't just about farming. This plan also built the foundation for India's legendary higher education system, establishing the first 5 IITs and the UGC. And the result? It was a smashing success, blowing past its growth target.
All right, with agriculture on a better footing, the second plan did a complete 180. It was time for a dramatic pivot to heavy industry. Guided by the famous Mahalanobis model, this plan was all about making India self-sufficient by building massive factories. This is where we get those iconic steel plants in Bhilai, Durgapur, and Rourkela. It's also when the Atomic Energy Commission was set up, a clear sign of India's growing technological ambitions.
The third plan had a really ambitious goal: make India's economy totally self-reliant. But it was just hit by a perfect storm of disasters. First, the 1962 war with China, then the 1965 war with Pakistan, and on top of all that, an absolutely devastating drought. These crises just sucked up all the nation's resources, diverting them from development to defense and just, survival.
And you can really see the brutal impact of those crises when you look at the numbers. The plan was targeting 5.6% growth, but the reality was a measly 2.4%. This massive gap is exactly why the third plan is pretty much universally considered a major failure.
So what do you do after a plan fails so spectacularly? Well, you take a break. Facing a huge financial crunch, the government declared what they called a plan holiday. And you know what? This 3-year pause turned out to be absolutely critical because it's during this break that one of the biggest game changers in India's history got started: the Green Revolution.
Once planning got back on track, the next 20 years or so saw a really big shift in thinking. The focus wasn't just on building dams and factories anymore. It expanded to tackling really deep social problems like poverty, and there was a renewed push for national self-reliance.
The fourth plan's slogan was growth with stability, and wow, this period was just packed with defining moments. 14 of the country's biggest banks were nationalized, which completely changed the financial system. The Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO, was born. And then, in 1974, India conducted its very first nuclear test, codenamed Smiling Buddha. A very eventful time.
Then came one of the most powerful and memorable political slogans in all of Indian history, Garibi Hatao, which means remove poverty. This simple, direct, and powerful phrase became the absolute central theme of the fifth 5-year plan.
Now, this Garibi Hatao plan is pretty unique. For starters, it's the only plan that was cut short, lasting just 4 years because of a change in government. But during its run, it established regional rural banks to get more financial services out to the countryside. After it was ended, there was a brief experiment with a more flexible rolling plan concept for a couple of years.
But, of course, the fight against poverty didn't just stop there. The sixth plan doubled down on it, establishing NABARD, the National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development, to really pump money into the rural economy. And the seventh plan kept that momentum going,
zeroing in on the three core needs: food, work, and productivity.
All right, we're now entering the final phase, the modern era. And this period is defined by the single biggest economic shakeup in modern Indian history. This is when India basically opened its doors to the rest of the world.
The big turning point was 1991. India was facing a severe economic crisis, and the government responded with the LPG reforms. That stands for liberalization, privatization, and globalization. This one set of policies completely rewrote the rules of the game and set a brand new course for every single plan that came after it. It was a total game changer.
So the eighth plan was the very first one to operate in this new liberalized world. And you can see the focus shift immediately. It moved towards human resource development, basically investing in people through education and health. During this time, India also joined the World Trade Organization, the WTO, and launched the huge midday meal scheme in schools.
And you can really see how the thinking evolved in this final stretch. The goals became more and more sophisticated. The ninth plan focused on social justice. The 10th had a super ambitious goal, to double per capita income. Then the 11th plan aimed for inclusive growth, making sure the benefits reached everyone. And finally, the 12th plan focused on sustainable growth.
That 12th plan, well, it turned out to be the last. In 2015, the Planning Commission, the institution that had steered India's economy for over 60 years, was dissolved. It was replaced by a new think tank called Niti Aayog, officially marking the end of the five-year plan era.
Okay, I know that was a whirlwind tour through 65 years of history, so let's boil it all down for you. Here is your cheat sheet with the most important, must-know facts from our entire journey. Think of it as the ultimate summary.
Let's do a quick fire round. Where did India get the whole idea from? The USSR. Who's considered the father of Indian planning? That's M. Visvesvaraya. Which was the only plan to last just 4 years? The fifth plan. The famous Garibi Hatao slogan. Also the fifth plan. When was NABARD founded? During the sixth plan. And when did those game-changing LPG reforms really kick in? During the eighth plan. Lock those in.
And that brings us to the end of the epic 65-year story of India's five-year plans. The system that literally built the economic foundations of modern India is now officially a part of history. Which, of course, leaves us with one final, huge question to think about. What new idea, what new vision is going to guide India for the next 65 years?